Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this morning for our webinar on strategies to improve user experience with Microsoft Teams. We're really thrilled to have a great group of people here with us today. And we've got this morning joining us from EMA, we have Valerie O'Connell, who is a digital service execution research director at EMA and brings some great insights to the market. I'm also joined, and very happy to be joined, by an actual end user of Microsoft Teams who uses Teams in a revenue generating role. So Wayne is going to join us and talk with Valerie about some of his experiences with Teams and the impact that that has on his business. Now, just a few housekeeping items. We will be taking questions and answers at the end of the session, but throughout the session, if you think of questions, please feel free to pop them into the chat and we'll go through as many of those as we can at the end. One other thing, I know people often like to get the slides, and so you know we will be sending out the recording of this event along with the slides after the webinar ends. Okay, so let's get into it. This morning, we, like I said, are lucky to have Valerie O'Connell, who's done extensive research on the state of Microsoft 365 performance management. And she's looked at performance management, but she's also looked at the impact of poor performance issues on the enterprise, on revenue generation, on your actual business. So Valerie's done a lot of research on this and is going to show us some insights and some of the results of that research that she's found. Then, like I said, we'll have Wayne bring his user perspective and see how it marries up with the findings that Valerie has found out in the market. And then finally, I'll be talking about some really practical strategies that you can use to improve the user experience for Teams in your organization. All right, so we want to start it off with a little bit of a poll so that we can see kind of what your mindset is around Microsoft Teams performance. So as you can see, our questions this morning are, when there is a problem with Teams, how big is the impact on productivity across your organization? Is it a high impact, meaning that productivity essentially grinds to a halt? Is it significant in that deadlines and deliverables are definitely going to slip? And is it moderate? You know, it's some trouble with communication, but you can usually find some workarounds. And finally, you know what? It's not an impact at all. It's not really going to make anyone's job difficult. So if everybody could put their response into that, we'll have a look and see what that looks like. Like I said, Valerie is going to share some really interesting insights on how users out in the market and companies out in the market have responded to this. All right. So if we could look at the poll results. So 19% of you find that productivity in business really grinds to a halt. Significant is 31%. And then 47% find that it's moderate. It does cause some trouble. And, you know, it's not making an impact. It's only 3% of people. And this jives a little bit with what we've seen in the market, as we are finding that organizations are very quickly beginning to realize that problems with Teams is more than just an annoyance. It actually has a real impact on the bottom line. So with that, I am going to get us kick-started here and pass it over to Valerie. Over to you, Valerie.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Maybe everyone in the world hasn't heard about EMA, so let me take just a second on that. Enterprise Management Associates is an industry analyst firm. We do research, we advise end users and vendors on strategies with technology. But as the name Enterprise Management Associates implies, since the early 1900s, no, 1990s. We're old, been around a while. We specialize in looking at how enterprises manage their technology. So that includes applications, infrastructure, new technology, etc. And when we do research, for instance, I've done a lot of research on Microsoft Teams and Microsoft 365. Some of it's sponsored by Martello. When a company sponsors our research, they make it financially possible for us to do it. But like advertisers on TV, they don't impact the content. They don't impact who we talk to or what our results are. Now, they can decide whether or not to use those results. In this case, we'll be sharing some of those with you today. So let's get into the research on Microsoft Teams. And it starts with Microsoft 365. Microsoft's 365 strategic role is been there since the start, but it's been on a sharp upward roll because of the reliance on Microsoft Teams in particular in a work from anywhere world. And I know a lot of people like to build up to their conclusion and you hang on their every word till they get there. I can save you the time. My bottom line in this presentation is that this strategic asset is almost shockingly undermanaged. And hopefully by the time we're done with our brief time here, you'll either agree or want to do something about it. So let's get into it. We started with Microsoft 365 research, asking when there is a Microsoft 365 outage, what is the impact on your organization? Now, I'm not going to go through all 4 of those. I'm going to concentrate on the one that says critical. And we define what critical meant. So you don't have to say when you're looking at these numbers, well, what do they mean by critical? What we meant and what we said and how we defined it was business grinds to a halt. That's pretty graphic. And 22% of the general population that we looked at in terms of Microsoft 365 outages says that business grinds to a halt. What I want to draw your attention to is if we're talking about Microsoft Teams being seen as critical, that number jumps to 70%. So for people to whom Microsoft Teams is part of their business and business grinds to a halt, when there's any kind of outage, it is critical, business grinds to a halt. And just as a little word, the C-suite is the one most likely to see that impact as being critical. I say here that only 43%, and we'll get into some of these figures later, rated their organization's ability to manage the suite as high. I find this a little puzzling when business grinds to a halt, but only 43 say their ability to manage the suite is high. The rest were evenly split between medium and low. So, next slide. We asked, when it comes to managing Microsoft 365 performance, which answer best characterizes your organizations? Well, your eye goes immediately to the 43% that says, we use a combination of Microsoft tools and our internal infrastructure monitoring. So that's kind of piecing it together. 25% solely rely on the tools that Microsoft supplies. And I'm drawing your attention to, at the bottom, I've highlighted 6.3% say we have proactive end user monitoring that kicks off problem resolution teams. And just about 4% say we have an end-to-end comprehensive view of Microsoft 365 performance and availability. So together, that's roughly 10% have comprehensive end-to-end and or proactive end user view. So put another way, 90% of organizations are using substandard management capabilities, even when a Microsoft 365 outage means that business grinds to a halt. So let's dig into that. We asked, the sudden shift to the hybrid workplace and work from anywhere caused what effect on the importance of Microsoft Teams? And by the way, this research was done last year. And you see that roughly 38% say it greatly increased, which we defined as more than doubled the usage, and 45% say it significantly increased, which we defined as doubled. When we asked them to characterize their organization's use of Microsoft Teams, 43% said it was strategic, and to them that meant critical to our everyday business It's the primary way of meeting, and this is true even with internal meetings. 45% say it's important. It's increased use since work from anywhere became common. So it's strategic, it's critical, or it's a substantial part of the workday. We're going to later on get into more specifics about customer-facing users, but I'll just touch on it here. 74% of customer-facing professionals are using Microsoft Teams a half a day or more. I believe it was over 5 hours that was that category. 75% of them use Microsoft Teams both for customer, external, and internal communications, which brought up an interesting point. The top benefit that customer-facing users mentioned was cross-functional collaboration and efficiencies. Next slide, Wendy. Which Microsoft Teams functions are most likely to be a problem? We asked them to select two, and they tied. Audio and visual calls tied with file sharing and collaboration. But there were other problems as well. Interestingly, 100% of the CXOs cite audio video calls. They really hate having their time interrupted. Next. So we asked when, not if, there is an issue with Microsoft Teams. When there's an issue with Microsoft Teams, how long does it usually take to get resolved? 40% say minutes, 43% say hours. And that little pause you saw here for me was because we have a mistake on that pie chart. When you encounter an issue or problem while using Microsoft Teams, what is your usual course of action? Those numbers should be reversed. 57% say that they contact IT support help desk, which makes sense. You would expect that. 43% say that they just do a workaround, and we're going to drill down into that. The market-facing, customer-facing, revenue-producing users are way more likely to represent this chart. Why don't people immediately contact IT? No, back, Wendy. Why don't people immediately contact IT support or the help desk when there is a Teams issue? 55% say the problems are usually minor or get fixed quickly, and 38% say it's easier to use a workaround, and that is, we will note whether that is corporate sanctioned or not. Some enterprises really care about using only sanctioned assets. Others don't care. But the point is, when people are working around, they are not checking to see if it's something that their enterprise approves of. And 7% say they don't believe IT will be able to help in time. And I note here that when outages are frequent or common, the heavy users, the power users, get used to finding workarounds rather than contact IT. So they almost never contact. Now we move to the next one, Wendy. We asked, when there is a problem with Microsoft Teams, what is most frequently the cause? And you're sitting out there and going, look, it is the culprit Microsoft. They are most often the cause. And that is true. They got a 23% hit there as being the frequent cause of Microsoft Teams. Looking at another way, 77% of the time, Microsoft Teams problem is something other than Microsoft. And that's something to remember. If you're relying on Microsoft Teams, Microsoft does a good job at looking at what's happening with Microsoft, but they don't do anything about what's happening with the user. And that's not a slam on Microsoft. It's just not their job. That's IT's job. So I say that the quality of Microsoft Teams performance is actually a complex product of technologies and variable user environments, which is a problem all on its own. And the user experience is more than the sum of the parts. So we're going to look at excellence in execution that requires that all the parts be both intelligible and actionable as the functioning whole that users experience. Next. I like this slide. It's so simple. So if most of the problems with Microsoft Teams are caused by something other than Microsoft, which it is, then it makes sense to take advantage of tools that are designed specifically for managing Microsoft Teams. Yet, this is where there'd be something's going to happen music. Of those who state that an outage causes business to grind to a halt, only 11% use any third-party tool for end-user performance, and 7% use one that is specific to Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365. Next. Now I'm going to turn our attention to, so we're creeping up on talking with Wayne soon, revenue producing users. We did a whole separate research initiative that had nothing to do with IT. It was strictly business users that were customer facing. And the breakdown was, please go back, Wendy. The breakdown was 21% sales and pre-sales, 58% were customer or constituent service and post-sales support, and 21% were other customer-facing teams, such as field service. So what we set out to find out was, does IT have the full picture when it comes to Teams performance? And the answer is no, they probably don't. I would go so far as to say, no, they definitely don't, but I'm hedging my bets here a little. This market-facing cohort that we put together for a research panel, 95, and there were roughly 200 or 300 of them in this particular initiative, 95% rate the service that their own organization delivers to its own customers as excellent. They also think highly of Microsoft Teams because 92% rate the performance and availability of Microsoft Teams at their company as excellent. And I make here the point that people like Microsoft Teams and they are generally very pleased with it. Yet 100% of our research panel experienced some degree of Teams problem, many/most of which IT will never see or hear about even after the fact. 43% do not contact, back please, Wendy. 43% do not contact IT when they have a Teams issue. They work around. And what I want to underline and highlight here is that sales professionals and people who are on the revenue producing side of the equation here, and CXOs are those that are least likely to contact IT. 75 to 80% say they never contact IT. Now let's move on. Before I go into the specifics, something, usually when you do research, it comes out pretty much what you think. And every now and then you come up with a surprise. And I was surprised by this little graph on the right. On average, how many participants are usually in your Microsoft Teams meetings? Now, these are market-facing, customer-facing users. I was surprised at how large the audiences were. I expected it to be like 3 or 4 people. But you see here that 54% say 6 to 10 people are generally in these Teams meetings, and 13% say more than 10 people. So you've got, a majority of people that have 10 or more people. So looking at sales teams in particular, remember we had some customer service and constituent support in this, but looking at sales, revenue producing teams in particular, they named the top use of Microsoft Teams as its time-saving ability to, and I quote, greatly speed behind the scenes problem solving and collaboration. So we're talking about time. And if you've ever dealt with a sales organization, been in a sales organization or managed one, you know that time is one of the most precious commodities that a sales agent or asset has. I mentioned before that most of them spend more than 5 hours a day using Teams. 49% of the sales panels state that it directly impacts customer service and revenue. I'm going to guess that it more likely impacts customer service than revenue, because if a botched Teams meeting is the reason you lose a sale, you probably deserve to lose it. But it doesn't help. It's not a plus in anybody's book. Yet, they are the least likely to ask for help, even though 57% of them say that disruptions usually last 5 minutes or more, and they happen with an uncomfortable level of frequency. So I make the point here that IT has the chance to directly boost the bottom line. Because if you can improve the performance of already excellent Microsoft Teams services, you're returning productive time to valuable sales talent. Next. And here we come to my Exhibit A, which is Wayne Gaudreau. Wayne, let's go back and so we can go over some of Wayne's highlights. Thanks. Wayne is here not representing any of the companies he works for, but he's here as a power user. He has spent most of his career as a director of insights and research, a lot of experience in both B2C and B2B research. He has always had revenue responsibility, although to the best of my knowledge, he's never directly carried a bag or been a salesperson, but he's been responsible for revenue generation in customer facing roles, and he can and probably will correct me when we speak. He has broad experience on both the vendor and client sides of the industry, and I want to start here. He's a longtime Microsoft Teams user, and he is a fan. So now let's talk with Wayne Gaudreau. Hi, Wayne.
Hi, Val. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So pretty soon people will catch on that this isn't scripted. Hopefully it'll still catch all the points. First of all, anything you want to correct or add to my description of who you are?
No, I mean, I think you captured it well. As you said, like my job has often been in research and insight. So a big part of my job, right, is gathering and presenting research. But with that, and anybody in the research industry could probably understand, is there's always some revenue generation aspect to that. Like in addition to, obviously, I have to do good research, and that leads to new business. In addition to that, I'm often on sales calls and helping to secure new businesses as well.
Great. So I mentioned that you're a fan of Microsoft Teams. You've used it in multiple career incarnations, correct? So
That's correct.
tell us what you like about Teams.
Yeah, I mean, the universality of Teams is a big plus, right? I mean, you don't know if your end user or your audience is going to have Zoom, or you don't know if they're going to have other tools that are available. So Teams is pretty universally available, so that's a big part of it. When it works, I think, to be honest, with when the video is working well, I think I look best on Teams. I think people look best on Teams as compared to other tools. So I think that that's always a positive, and I think the user interface is usually easy to use as well. I mean, if I have to switch, for example, between cameras or microphones, that's usually easy to find on Teams, and that sometimes does have to happen. So yeah, that's usually what I like about Teams.
All right. So I know that you're no stranger to glitches. I mean, anybody who relies on technology all the time is experienced with having some glitches. What do you usually do? Or tell me about what kinds of problems, and problem may be too big a word, but when you're having a meeting and it's, customer facing, tell us a little about your audience and what kind of, bumps in the road Microsoft might present to you.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll take a step back and just kind of talk about how I've used it in the past, like what I'm really using Teams for. Looking back on your slides you just presented, I probably think I would fall in that critical group of users. We use it a lot. So both for internal and external client-facing calls. And when those client-facing calls are happening, they fall into kind of the two camps that I was talking about in terms of my main job, right? Is they fall into either, I've collected all my research for my client, I put my report together, and now I'm going to present it to my audience. That audience, I was thinking of that slide that you just showed where it showed kind of the size of audience. That's typically where I'm hitting my biggest audiences. Those could be anywhere from, 5 to 20 or 30 people on a call. And those can range from, I'm often talking to research departments, but often there's C-suite, there's marketing, so there's a lot of people on those calls that need to be part of them and need to have those calls go well. And then the other side of my business, like I said, when I'm helping to secure new business, those are often done through teams as well. So those are smaller audiences. Typically, you're often talking in that point to research departments. Occasionally, marketing folks or sales folks are on the call as well. So yeah, I mean, in terms of glitches that I've seen that have kind of impacted the way these calls have gone, it really runs the gamut. I mean, and it really runs the gamut in terms of where those issues are originating from, right? So it could be that it's a Microsoft Teams issue that does happen, right? So maybe people can't log in, maybe there's an outage somewhere and they can't get into the Teams call. That definitely does happen. But sometimes there's bandwidth issues that cause the video to be jittery or the audio to not work. In fact, that I feel like if I was to think of the most common issue, those are probably the more common issues that I see is like, the video's not working correctly either on my side or on my audience's side, or the audio's not working. I've been on so many calls.
That was the top problem that people cited, and the number one that CXOs hate. So you track really well there. So what do you do when there's a problem?
It depends on the problem, but I'm commonly looking for ways to fix it myself. I mean, like you said, time is of the essence, right? So I don't have time to put a ticket in, get IT on the phone, have them come and fix the calls. So often I'm trying to, I have kind of things in my back pocket, being on so many of these calls that I kind of turn to try to fix it first. I mean, obviously there's always the dreaded shutdown and restart that we can try. That obviously cuts into our time a little bit and can impact the call, make it a little bit clunkier. Sometimes if it's an issue on my end where I can't get in, say via my laptop or via my typical entry point, I might use my phone. Not optimal, right? I mean, a phone can be a little shaky. You never know how it's going to go. If I'm, reaching for the controls, you can see my big finger show up on the screen. So, not optimal. And then, we do also have a Zoom in our back pocket, right? Like I said, I prefer Teams. I think the calls just look better when it works, but Zoom is another option. So, if we have to, we'll send out another meeting link and use Zoom. Again, not optimal. I mean, if we have to send another meeting link, that does make things feel a little less seamless, a little clunkier.
But you have generally a standing Zoom account ready to go, right? This isn't like, oh, let's think of Zoom. It's ready to go, right?
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, we've been doing it for a while, right? So I think that kind of points to the fact that it does happen enough that we have a link ready to go, just in case.
Well, we aren't scripted, but there were certain things I wanted to make sure we covered. Let me look at my list.
Sure.
Oh, okay. So here's one I wanted to ask you. So I understand you've got CXOs lined up in meetings. Those don't happen overnight. They're not easy to reschedule, and that time is really valuable. And their patience is like this.
Oh yeah.
Plus, even if they're not the one making the final buying decision, they definitely impact your internal supporters. So if they're not happy with the meeting, that's not good. But so I understand why you would not contact IT after the fact. Do you ever contact IT and let them know, hey, we managed to find our way around it, but here's the problem?
Well, I mean, I hope my IT department is not watching right now. But yeah, I mean, I guess it falls on me. I typically probably don't. By the time the call is kind of ended, right, and we've kind of gone through it, either again if it's a new business opportunity or if it's a final presentation of results, I'm moving on at that point. I mean, I need to make sure that if it's a new business situation, I'm getting a proposal written and getting that out and getting that moving. If it's a final results, that I'm getting my slides together and sending them out to my audience. I really typically at that point, I figured out my workaround. It worked. We got it going. I probably don't need to reach out to IT. I probably, again, should be. So shame on me, I guess. But yeah,
So,
I
so
should be
the
reaching out
answer
to them
is
more
no.
often.
The IT would never see these problems,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Although I enjoyed the journey of your story. Before I let you go, Wayne, is there anything else that you think would be useful to share or that I forgot to ask? My little list of questions, a brief glance at it, I don't have anything more to ask you. Anything more to add?
I mean, I guess the only thing I would add is, you mentioned earlier, like I think I can't remember the slide, but it said basically like, is it an impact directly on revenue or is it more just like an impact on customer service, right? I
Right.
mean, for sure, it's an impact on customer service, but to be honest, like in my career, in my job, I'm often up against companies that are very similar to my company. Like on paper, it'd be very hard to kind of pick between the two. And to be honest, any little snafu or issue just does feel pretty monumental in those calls. So I would say, yeah, I mean, getting that under control and getting an element of management around that would make sense. I mean, because again, it is, I don't know, if I lose a couple minutes with a new business call, that does feel big. It feels pretty important.
Well, when you're selling research, you're selling and consulting services, you're selling an intangible. So anything that surrounds that presentation just kind of emotionally accrues to the perception of the value of the company. So I might want to backstep what I said about if you lose business because of a bad Microsoft Teams. So that's a
I mean,
good.
I think you're right in that having a direct link between that and revenue is hard, but I think there's a very, very vague indirect link to that. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Yeah, like on those calls, I'm typically selling myself. If I'm not coming through well, that's a big problem. Yeah.
Well, you came in well today, Wayne.
Thanks.
I really appreciate your being here and I enjoy um, I enjoy you. But now I'm going to get rid of you
All right.
and wrap up with my last slide. So I hope the viewing audience here now sees why I say that Microsoft Teams is almost shockingly undermanaged. The findings in this research may surprise IT. It probably will surprise IT because the problems, as we've discussed and shown with Exhibit A, Wayne, the problems aren't generally visible to them, nor will they be. But it's actually good news for IT because there's room for improvement in a service that is already really well liked. IT has the opportunity to make a high impact contribution to revenue. IT has traditionally, since the invention of the abacus, been struggling to get a seat at the table equal with the business. And the best way to do that is by making a business impact. And here you have the opportunity. By improving the team's experience for your customer-facing teams, you have the opportunity to make a high impact contribution to revenue. And luckily, Martello has exactly some tools and solutions that'll help you do that, which makes this a good time to turn it over to Wendy.
Great. Thank you very much to both Valerie and Wayne. It's fascinating to me the disparity between the view of IT about the user experience when it comes to Teams and the view of the actual users. And it's users who are the ones who are using this as a part of their day-to-day business that are most impacted by this. And it's their view that really does count. And it was interesting during Wayne's session, talking about being able to sell himself and to be able to communicate well and build relationships with his customers. I consider myself to be a little bit of a nerd when it comes to brain science. It's always fascinated me. And, a lot of the reading I've done around kind of the advent of all these virtual meetings and virtual calls has talked about the fact that you're already at a disadvantage when you're not sitting in person with somebody. You compound on the fact that you're doing it virtually and you're already at a disadvantage because it's more difficult to connect. It is more difficult to be clear. And the reasons for that are simply the way the brain works. So in order to, not have a further deficit, you need to really make sure that the technology works well and is delivering crisp and strong video. It's delivering very clear audio, which I'm noticing we've got quite a bit of background noise. So if I could ask the other presenters to mute, please. So if you're having these problems on your call, your ability to land a new customer, your ability to connect with your employees and get everybody on the same page to move forward is a huge impact if there's problems. And that's where it's very, very clear that the impact of Teams problems isn't just an annoyance. It is actually a real impact on your bottom line and your business. So now we'd like to turn to talk a little bit about some strategies that you can use to greatly improve your management of that user experience and to ensure that you're delivering proactively a strong experience for your users. So as Valerie alluded to in one of her pieces of research, when there's a problem with Teams, there's so many places that that problem can come from. Microsoft Teams, I think her research showed that only 23% of the time is the problem actually from Microsoft. I've seen research that shows it's much lower than that. So the rest of the time, the majority of the time, the problem is happening somewhere else in the communication chain. So now if you think about it, starting right from the user, you've got a user that may be working in the office, maybe working at home. There's a lot of things that can go wrong on their end. Maybe their Wi-Fi signal isn't strong enough. Maybe they've got a shortage of RAM or memory when it comes to their actual device that's impacting the performance, or their headset isn't compatible. There's all kinds of user issues that can happen. Think about your Teams rooms. A lot of enterprises are investing big right now in Teams room infrastructure as they try to facilitate a better hybrid world experience so that they can have an immersive experience for remote participants and people who are actually sitting in a Teams room. And things like speaker health or display health can all impact the performance of Teams. One of the biggest areas of impact is actually your network. And I don't think that's surprising to anyone. Your bandwidth can be poor, maybe a network switch falls over, you've got dropped streams, and it's not just your local network, it's your service provider's network as well. If they aren't living up to the SLA they've set with you, that can have a big impact on your team's performance. So I'm just gonna have a sip here. But how do you deal with this complexity? You can see why it's very difficult with all of these different places that things can go wrong for IT to get their arms around of managing problems when they do occur or proactively preventing them in the first place. And the first place that most organizations start is with the call quality dashboard that comes with Microsoft Teams. And that is a fabulous starting point. So it allows you to measure the quality of calls. It can look at the user's ability or user's success in terms of having calls. It can look at trends over time to see, are there certain days of the week, maybe when our calls are worse? Or is there a certain part of our organization where we're having a lot of problem calls? And this is all great, but it doesn't help you have visibility of that entire communications chain. So you don't have that end-to-end visibility. And one of the key things that is missing in that visibility is the ability to monitor the network path, kind of monitor how the communication flows from the user across your network, across your service provider network, right into that Microsoft data center. So you don't have visibility of what's happening at the network level. And because of that, it's very difficult to determine the root cause of your problem. In fact, a lot of times the organizations will look at their call quality dashboard and they might go, oh, look at, there's some big problems happening with users. And they'll go look into their environment layout and they'll see, oh, it's users in our office in let's say Zurich that are having a problem. And so they'll actually ask the network person at the Zurich office to pull the network data, and they'll try to correlate it with those call problems to identify where that network problem might be coming from. And if they aren't doing that, lots of times they are doing almost trial and error troubleshooting, where they're trying a bunch of different things to see if they can resolve the problem. And as a consequence, it often takes a really long time, is very manual and very challenging for IT to resolve problems that they do know about. you can imagine they don't know about a lot of the problems, as we heard from Valerie. Many users don't report the problems, and they don't have any kind of a strong view on how things are going. If you look at the call quality dashboard, yes, it provides you a great view of the call performance, but it's a look in the rear view mirror. So you're only seeing things after they have happened. And doesn't have alerting. It's not doing 7/24 monitoring. So it's not giving you that consistent view of what's happening, and it's not alerting you when problems are found. So it needs to be a really manual process to go and look at things, how things are performing. But the good news is there's a lot you can do to make yourself more proactive, make it easier to figure out what the root cause of something is, and deliver a much stronger user experience. So the ways that you can do this, and this is where Martello comes into play with our tools. Essentially, one of the key things that we do is we broaden the data sources that we use in analyzing your team's performance. So we absolutely use that really valuable call quality dashboard, but we augment it. We have network probes that sit on your network and look at how that team's traffic is performing across the network. Allows you to do trace by trace or hop by hop tracing of the path right from your user all the way to the data center, so that you can, and it's really nicely visualized as you can see on the right, so that you can quickly look at this and go, oh, I see where we've got a problem hop. It's the red dot on my visualization. You can quickly determine who owns that problem. Is the problem in your own organization on your local network? Or is it one of your service providers that's having the problem? You can place the call to get them to actually go and resolve the problem quickly. And oftentimes when there's a problem, there tends to be a lot of finger pointing between different teams, whether it's your teams group and your network group trying to prove that it's actually the network causing the problem. Well, isn't it great when you've actually got the proof that you can take to the party that needs to resolve this problem so that they can act on it very quickly? So by adding that network path performance, you're having a much more complete end-to-end view of all of the places that issues can arise in terms of impacting teams' performance. But not only, we don't stop there. As I mentioned, the call quality dashboard is a look in the rear view mirror. That doesn't help you stop problems before they impact users. And that's why we bring to bear synthetic testing, so that we can deliver proactive detection. So what synthetic testing is we have a robot that sits on your network and continuously simulates user teams' behavior. It will try to connect a call. It will connect to a meeting. It will try to share the screen. It will do all of these different actions that are taken by users and teams, but it'll do them without the user in play, so that you can see when there are issues before they ever do impact a user, and you can resolve them. So it lets you be much more proactive. In customers I've spoken to, one of the biggest pain points I hear from IT teams is they are just so sick of being in firefighting mode, continually reacting to the latest problem that arises, because either a user does log a ticket, or nobody logs a ticket, but that big high profile meeting with all of your C-suite in it goes down or doesn't go well. And that creates a big firestorm for everybody in IT. So they want to be able to be much more proactive, so that they aren't always trying to keep up with the latest problem. So having this synthetic testing lets you have that visibility of where issues are, so you can resolve them before they ever do impact users. So the beautiful thing about this is that we apply this extended data, all of the broad sources of data. We can bring in data from your ITSM, your IT service management, whether it's ServiceNow or Cherwell, and we apply analytics to that, so that we can provide you really quick, at-a-glance dashboards that let you know what's going on. You can see this is a simple dashboard at the top level of our solution, which highlights where there's problems across your organization. Highlights, hey, we've got a call rate that's lower than it should be. We need to take a look at that. But the beauty of it is you can slice and dice this data to look at it from any different perspective. So you can drill down in this dashboard to look at an individual office and see how it's performing. To look at maybe your VIP users, your C-suite, how are their calls performing? And also you can set alerts. So this is 7x24 monitoring, and you can set alerts against these different elements of your organization. So maybe you've got a threshold set that if your C-suite's good call rate goes below like 98%, you're going to get on it. You're going to get an alert, and you're going to try and resolve that before it turns into a big issue. And it's funny, I came from the telecom space and the IP telephony space probably over 10 years ago now. And then the mantra was, you need 99.9% reliability and call quality. Now we seem to have forgotten about the importance of that. And as Valerie said, it's shockingly undermanaged, and we leave it almost to chance. So I think many organizations that we talk to are starting to realize the really negative impact on their business, and they're looking for ways to resolve these issues today. So just wanted to give you a quick taste about how Martello lets you deliver a frictionless Microsoft Teams experience. And we do that by letting you proactively detect problems so you can identify them before they impact users. We let you resolve faster by giving you that complete view from end to end of the communications chain so that you can troubleshoot and resolve issues in minutes instead of the days that it took when you were manually looking for data, trial and error troubleshooting, trying to correlate different sources of information from different information silos. And then finally, we give you a way to optimize and elevate your business. I loved Valerie's point about IT always trying to get a seat at the table. I've read a lot on CIO priorities, and most organizations have priorities around customer experience. They have employees around or KPIs around employee engagement. Those are things that you can directly show how you are impacting in IT, and basically be able to give yourself a seat at the table by showing the importance of different things that IT is doing to actually improve and achieve those objectives that the organization is setting. So that's how we can help you to optimize your environment and elevate your business. Okay, so Martello, we offer the actual only experience management solution that was purpose-built for Microsoft Teams. So there's lots of experience management solutions out there, but by being purpose-built for Microsoft Teams, we are able to emulate with that synthetic testing a whole bunch of different capabilities that users use so that we can proactively find issues at a really deep level and give you a good depth of information as you are evaluating the performance in your environment and evaluating your user experience. So again, thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today. I encourage you, if you're interested in learning more, you can just take a picture of this code, and you will be taken to a form to actually submit a request for a meeting. You'll also see an email coming in the next few days with a recording and these slides as well, and other ways to reach us as well. So with that, I am going to ask Valerie and Wayne to rejoin me, and we are going to open it up to questions. So
while you're waiting for questions, I just wanted to first of all, you did a great job. But you were talking about avoiding negative impact. I think given how much people really like and use Microsoft Teams, and remember, like 92% of them rate the service as excellent. It's not so much that people are going to identify with negative impact, but what they're doing is missing a lot of big opportunities to make a difference. So it's not so much, doom and gloom, negative. It's that they have a significant and important opportunity to make a difference in ways that matter to the business, that really matter to the business. Okay, I'm done.
That's okay. No, that's a great addition for sure. And our first question that's come in is for Wayne, actually. So it says, you said you always keep Zoom at hand in case Teams doesn't work for you. How do you justify that extra cost for thousands of employees?
I mean, that's probably more of a question for our CFO, but I think again, these calls are pretty integral to our business. They're pretty important, so it's good to have that backup. And to be honest, I mean, I don't know how many licenses for Zoom that we have. We may have only a couple of shared licenses that we use. So
Yeah. And I think another issue there is, most organizations are very concerned about shadow IT, right? So if you're a salesperson who knows you're having trouble with Teams and you're like, I'm never going to be caught in one of those horrible calls again, a lot of people kind of set up their own accounts and do their own thing outside of the purview of IT. And, I come from the security space. That is not what you want happening, right?
right.
It is a risk for your organization. So if you're not delivering that really solid user experience, there's a very real risk that your users are finding a different way to talk to their customers or whoever else they need to talk to, and that opens your organization up to risk. So,
Yeah.
Sure. All right, Valerie, you said that Teams is undermanaged. Do you think that will change in the next little while, or is it just too far down the priority list for most organizations?
Well, that's one of the reasons why we do a webinar like this in research. I mean, I've said before that Martello solves a problem that most companies don't know they have. So I wouldn't be in a big hurry to sign up to sell for Martello because that's an uphill climb. But I would think that when people really just look at the basic facts, how much it's used, how critical it is, like when business grinds to a halt, that's non-trivial. Wayne's talking about his calls really being the lifeblood of their company. Once you've got that mindset and it's raised to your attention, I think it makes sense to look into what you can do about it. But do I think there's going to be a big rush to knock down Martello's doors? No, but hopefully those doors will be knocked on by many people who are here today. It's a matter of learning about the opportunity and learning. I mean, it's good news, bad news. The bad news is you have a problem you didn't know about. Oops, good news is you can fix it.
Yeah, and so I guess one thing I would share is, we've got a really fast-growing customer base of large enterprise customers that are very much and very quickly starting to realize that their business is dependent upon it. We just recently did a case study that we'll be issuing probably in the next little while, where we have a customer who uses Teams exclusively for customer support and communication. And they've realized, like, our customer experience, we are useless when Teams goes down, and our customer experience is suffering in a big way. So I feel like the understanding of the actual impact on the business is really starting to become something that a lot of organizations are more aware of and are looking at how, what direction they should be going in order to resolve that. So
I will say a couple things. I've been familiar with Martello for a couple of years here, and your clients love you. You don't lose clients once you have them. Also, for anybody who's thinking, well, I might like to look into this, but you're not sure how your CXO is going to respond to it. They know these problems, and when you bring up and format it, the proposition, I think it'll be a more receptive audience than you think.
yeah, exactly. Excellent. So another question that we've got is, how does the solution help people working from home? So this is, one of the big drivers is the change in the way people work for ensuring that you're giving your users a great experience. And what we can do for your users at home is, because we've got that network analytics, we can see the traffic for Teams right from the user at home. Is their Wi-Fi signal weak? We can look at it hop by hop all the way up to their the Microsoft data center. So that gives you a lot of information, right? If you've got users who are working at home that are consistently having problems, and you can quickly pinpoint, well, it's because they've got a terrible ISP service, right? That's where the problem is coming from. You can make some recommendations, or maybe even give your employees a stipend to let them get a much better ISP service so that you're going to eliminate that problem. So because we've got visibility of not only the network, we've got visibility of their endpoint. We can see, hey, when they're using Teams, is their laptop about to tip over because it's running out of CPU or it doesn't have enough memory? That gives you the intelligence that you need to actually make decisions about where you're going to invest to resolve these problems. Maybe your user just needs a new laptop. Maybe they're on an old version of a client. There's lots of things we see about the individual user that can help you quickly diagnose and resolve the problem. So, all right, let me see other ones. One question I get, which is a great one, is won't your solution create too many alerts to look at for IT? So that is a very interesting question, especially on top of the question about an individual user. So we allow you to customize when your alerts are going to fire, right? Your alerts might not fire for an individual user who's having some problems on an individual call, because we allow you to set the threshold, and that might be impactful to that user, but it may not be impactful to a broader swath of organizations. But if it's a Friday and your sales team in a particular office has, let's say, a call down day going where they are basically doing dialing for dollars to basically get out there and find new customers. And oh yeah, let's say it's also the last day of the quarter and you've got your sellers trying to close their quarter end business. And you have your threshold set that if in any one particular office, a certain level of poor call quality arises, you get alerted so you can fix that. That's important. That's going to help you very quickly determine that there is a hugely business impacting problem that we need to get on top of. You're going to have the information that you need to troubleshoot it very quickly and to get it resolved. So that's a good example of kind of the individual user versus the impact on a number of users. So you can set thresholds based on who the users are, based on the number of users who are impacted, the geography. Are they those VIP users who can be really noisy when there is a problem? Those are the kind of thresholds that you can set for alerts. The other thing that, a couple of weeks ago, I think probably most people on this call experienced the Teams outage that came from Microsoft. And it was a Friday afternoon, and Twitter was full of people going, "Thanks for the early weekend, Microsoft. I appreciate this." All kinds of tweets like that. But the reality is that our customers actually knew about that outage an hour and a half before Microsoft ever announced it. And that's because we can see right to the Microsoft data center what the user experience is. And we could see there was an outage at Microsoft an hour and a half. So what did that mean? By knowing earlier, they could proactively let their users know that there was a problem, figure out workarounds for those really important calls, and basically kind of eliminate some of the really business impacting friction that comes along with a Teams outage. And I just got the sign, we're coming to the end of our time. So with that, I'm going to thank you all for joining us today. I will be looking at the questions afterwards, and if there's any that we didn't get to, I will definitely respond to you over email. So watch your email for the follow-up information, and I encourage you to reach out to us and have a conversation about how you can improve user experience with Teams. And thank you very much to Valerie and to you, Wayne. You added some fantastic perspective today. Thank you,
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.